Morning.
Morning.
I was tempted to start singing, but thought better of it.
See, actually the thing is I just don't have a voice much right now, so he's just going to interpret my hand motions for the sermon.
How hard could that be?
We might get out a little early.
Hey, thanks. Jess, could you come up here, please? So while she's coming, I got one question for you all, and I'd like you to shout out the answer. So there's a major national holiday coming before the end of this month. What is it?
Boxing Day.
All right. So I think most of you got it wrong. I heard Carol Bradley's birthday, and you're right. My wife believes that December 29th is a major national holiday, but that's not the one that I was thinking of. So Christmas. So Pastor Josh and Jess, I'm sure you got a similar envelope the first service, so you're not surprised. You never
Hard to surprise us twice in the same day.
Some year we're going to give you your Christmas card during May. So it's just, but just want to take this chance again to thank you both for all you do for us here. We took a collection for a gift for Christmas offering for you both and your family. Just like to present it to you and thank you again for all you do. We appreciate it. We appreciate you being here with us. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we are, wow, every year we do kind of get a little surprised by this, at least the first time around. We are very thankful and excited to be here, although we wake up on mornings like this when it's like 5 degrees outside, snowy. People decide not to sit in the first 5 rows of the middle section. So one of you finally here. Thank you, yeah. But no, we're excited to be here. It's a lot of fun, and we'll suffer through the cold. And we are in week 3 of a series called Awaken the Wonder. But before we get there, next week on Sunday, it is Christmas Eve, which is a little bit different that it's on a Sunday this year. So I wanted to kind of let you guys know what the schedule is, because usually on Christmas Eve we have kind of an evening service that happens, but nothing in the morning, except for this year, Christmas Eve is on Sunday. So I wanted to give you guys the heads up for the schedule here. We threw around a lot of different ideas, but next Sunday morning, we are having both the 9 o'clock and the 10:30 like normal. We realize that a lot of people might be out of town, those kind of things, but we wanted just to go ahead and make sure that everybody had every opportunity to be able to be here on Christmas Eve, and you didn't use the excuse like, oh, they canceled the service that I normally go to. Guess I'll sleep in and then go to Cracker Barrel, right? We wanted to take that excuse right out of there and be able to say, you know what? Whenever you're used to being here, 9 or 10:30, you can be here. And then at 4 p.m., we're going to have something a little bit different. It'll be a little bit shorter. It'll be a candlelight service with some singing, reading of the Christmas story to kind of get us ready for Christmas Eve. So that'll be at 4 p.m. You can actually do morning and evening if you wanted to. And so that's what the schedule's like next Sunday. And then the Sunday after that is New Year's Eve, and we will be back on for our normal schedule at 9 and 10:30 that day. Everybody good? All right. I love it. Love the enthusiasm. You're going to need more of that today because, here's the thing. The Christmas story, we're in a series called Awaken the Wonder. This is week 3. And you're going to let me just ask it like this, since we're kind of a smaller crew today. How many of you have already done some Christmas eating this year? Like you've baked cookies and eaten them, brownies, something like that? Yeah, everybody gets excited about that. How many of you have watched a Christmas movie already this year? Okay, most of you. How many of you have listened to Christmas songs besides just here this year? Okay, good. How many of you have already done some Christmas shopping this year? There are certain people in the room that haven't raised their hand to anything yet. Scrooge, all right. How many of you are completely finished with all of your Christmas shopping? A few of you. Okay, we're lower number of hands here. All these things are really great. They're really, really cool, and we should do and have fun with all these things. But sometimes in the doing of all these things, we miss the most important thing and the main thing, and we want to make sure that we don't. And the reality is that every Christmas, every December, you know what we should all just be like walking around constantly like, wow, I can't believe it's this time of year again. But the reality is, just imagine yourself as Buddy the Elf from the movie. Just be that excited all the time. And the reality is, though, is that sometimes this story gets so old to us. We've heard it so many times. It's just kind of become, we hear the Christmas story again. And even if you're not a church person or you're new to this whole church thing, you've probably at least heard the Christmas story. And it kind of just becomes mundane. It kind of just becomes part of the season. And I don't want that to happen to us this year, which is why we are awakening the wonder of Christmas. Now, we are going to do that today. And I want to tell you four things that I think are so important. And they actually all originated with Christmas. And you may have known these things, or maybe you haven't thought about these things in quite this way, but we can learn all of these things and how they relate to our life from the Christmas story. So the reality is, though, when we get to these four things, I'm going to need you to be excited about them. I'm going to need you to have like a mind-blowing, like, wow, that is amazing. I can't believe I hadn't thought that started with Christmas. And if you don't, I'm going to assume that I just wasted my time because you all already knew all of this. And this could have been a lot shorter. So I need you to have some excitement. I can see it in your faces. I have a feeling I might be disappointed. But Matthew chapter 2, if you have your Bible, we're going to turn there. We're going to get started with this story. And we're going to read a story that you've all heard before. And we're going to learn about some of the people in this story and about what God can teach us through Christmas with this story. You guys ready? Matthew chapter 2. I like the enthusiasm. Starting with verse 1. It says this. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Let's pause right here, and let's talk about some of these characters and why this is so important. So here's the thing, now. I don't want to dash your Christmas spirit, but I think I need to a little bit here. Because I need to tell you a few things that we may have wrong about the Christmas story. And like, for example, there's some of the songs that we do. Like, how many of you are familiar with the song Silent Night? Okay, everybody's familiar with the song Silent Night. There's some words in that song that say something like this. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. How many of you have ever been present during a birth? Okay, I've been present during 3, and I can tell you that all is not calm. That's not the way that births work. And for some people, all is not calm even after an epidural, right? That's just not the way that the birthing process works. And so we kind of miss this sometimes. All was not calm. Or how about this one? There's a song called Away in a Manger. You guys familiar with that song? And one of the verses of that song says, The cattle are lowing, the poor baby wakes, but little Lord Jesus, no crying he makes. Now again, parents who have had a newborn in the room, if you, on the first night of your newborn's life, if he wakes up and there's a cow sitting right beside him that starts mooing in his face, do you really think there's going to be no crying he makes? Right? The reality is we kind of make this story something that it's not sometimes, because the reality is this is one of those moments. It's not like, oh, she's having a baby, great, this is going to be a peaceful evening. This is, oh my goodness, she's having a baby, what do we do now? Kind of moment. And it gets crazy. And with these wise men that came, do you guys realize that the wise men weren't even there on the night that Jesus was born? They weren't there. They started their journey on the night that Jesus was born, but do you know how far they had to go? Around 900 miles. They didn't get there that night. Matter of fact, so that's about the equivalent of you getting out right now from here and going to the Georgia-Tennessee border on a donkey. All right? So you're not going to get there tonight. And so the wise men started out on their trip tonight, and then they slowly got there over the course of months. And let me ask you another question. How many wise men are there? We assume 3 because that's how many gifts they brought. They brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And by the way, only one of those is a good gift, right? I mean, you can't ever get enough frankincense, right? And so the thing is, there were probably many more than 3 wise men. We only assume that there were 3 because of the gifts they brought, but there were actually probably many more than 3 wise men. Matter of fact, scholars say that at least a dozen, maybe even more than that. And they didn't travel just the 3 of them on camels like you may have seen in a movie. They actually traveled as a caravan with their spouses, with their kids, probably their grandkids, all of their livestock. This was a big, big to-do. And when they got to Jerusalem, by the way, it tells us in verse 3 that they caused trouble in Jerusalem, that all of Jerusalem was troubled. Do you really think 3 guys on camels with some frankincense and myrrh are going to cause problems in all of Jerusalem? No, this was a big caravan that came in that caused problems in Jerusalem. And here may be the biggest question of all. And I've always wondered this. How in the world did they, of all the people in the world, know to go to where this star went or got lit up or whatever it was, because the Messiah was being born? You guys understand what the Messiah is, right? The Messiah was the Jewish person that was going to be born, that was going to be the king of Israel, that was going to save them, that was going to distinguish, or going to get rid of all their oppressors. And the first people that know that he's born are Persian astrologers 900 miles away. Does that seem weird to anybody else? I guess not. That seems really weird to me. And the simple answer may be, well, I guess that God showed it to them. Which leads you to another question. Why would God only show the birth of his son to Persian astrologers 900 miles away and not to the people of Israel right there? Does that make sense to anybody else? See, here's the thing that I think was happening. These guys were astrologers. They were wise men. They knew the stars. They loved the stars. And there was this simple thing that happened hundreds of years before this moment. There was an exile. You see, the Jewish people, they constantly were getting exiled in the Old Testament. Just everywhere you turn, they were getting exiled because of their rebellion and their sin against God. And this one time that they were exiled to Persia. And what they did was they came and they took the brightest people from Israel and they brought them over to what is modern-day Iran, and they got to live in their cities. And no doubt, this is where people like, if you're familiar with the Old Testament, people like Daniel from the story of Daniel in the lion's den, or Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego from the story of the fiery furnace from the Old Testament. These were the guys that got taken out of Israel and shipped up there, and what they did was they took their customs, they took their writings, they took their literature up, and they showed it to the people that were there. And no doubt they took the writings of Moses, and they took the writing of some of the prophets that they had with them, and they shared them with these people. And now, hundreds of years later, after they've been shared, there's this one particular prophecy that was shared, or that they were given. It was out of the book of Numbers, which is the 4th book of the Bible. There's a lot of law written in there. But in between that law, there's this really, really awesome story, and there's this really, really awesome prophecy that comes out of this. Are you guys familiar with the movie Shrek? Anybody familiar with the movie Shrek? It was actually inspired by this verse. Check this out. It's found in Numbers chapter 22, and there's this guy named Balak. He's an evil king, and he looks at Israel, he's jealous of Israel, he's angry with Israel, he hates Israel, and so he decides that he's going to hire a prophet to go and curse Israel. The ancient world worked really, really weird ways. He's going to hire this prophet named Balaam to go and curse Israel. Well, obviously, God doesn't want Israel cursed, and so what happens is when Balaam is on his way, he's riding on his donkey, he gets out there, and God sends an angel of the Lord to stand in his way with a sword to stop Balaam from going to curse Israel. But the only problem was the only one that could see the angel with the sword was the donkey. It was the donkey. And so the donkey stops, and Balaam decides he needs to beat his donkey, and then he stops again. And check out how the story goes after this. Numbers chapter 22, it says this: Then the angel of the Lord went ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn either to the right or to the left. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam, and Balaam's anger was kindled, and he struck the donkey with his staff. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, "What have I done to you that you have struck with me these 3 times?" This is where the Shrek part comes in. If you're not familiar with Shrek, there's a talking donkey. I just ruined it for you, but great. And Balaam, not acting in complete surprise, just said to the donkey, "Because you have made a fool of me. I wish I had a sword in my hand, for then I would kill you." And the donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your donkey?" You can hear the emotion in the donkey's voice. "Am I not your donkey? I'm your donkey, man, on which you have ridden all of your life long to this day." is it my habit to treat you this way? And I love the way Balaam answered, no. It's weird. And so what happens next is that God opens Balaam's eyes. He sees the angel. He sees that his donkey has saved his life. And he decides, I'm not going to curse Israel, even though that's what I've been paid to do, even though that's what they've asked me to do. I'm not going to curse Israel. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bless Israel. I'm going to bless them with a prophecy. And the prophecy goes like this. Found just a couple chapters later in Numbers 24. It says this, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. And then it says, a star shall come out of Jacob, or out of Israel, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. So these astrologers, these wise men, took this to mean a star is going to rise over Israel, and a king is going to be born. And they took this prophecy, scholars believe, and they remembered it, and they passed it down, and they took this, and then the wise men went to worship Jesus. Isn't that cool? That's incredible. And then, that's the wise men from this story. But then we also need to learn a little bit about Herod, this king, because Herod was probably the most brutal king that Israel had ever seen. And really, he was a Roman puppet. He was a Jew. He was from Israel, but he did what the Roman government wanted to do because he was just over this province of the Roman government, of the Roman Empire. And so he was literally doing whatever they wanted. And listen, he was like the most showy king you could ever have. Like, he would take all the people's money and he would build these big palaces and put his name on it, right? He wanted to live in complete luxury. Matter of fact, there was this one time where David, who was the king in the Old Testament, probably the greatest king that Israel ever had, he went and he hid from a guy named Saul in this cave at a place called Masada. And Herod said, you know what? If David can stay there in this rugged, rustic place, I can too. And so he built a luxurious palace there and lived there. You can actually still go there today. That's kind of how he lived. And he was the most brutal, and he was so nervous, he was so paranoid that somebody was going to come and take his power away that he actually had his own wife killed because he thought that she was trying to get more power than him. And just to make sure that nobody else was going to do anything, he actually had her brother and her mother killed too. He had 3 of his grandsons killed because he thought that they wanted his power. He was just a monster. And on top of that, he wasn't very good with money. He would spend all of his money on these flashy places, on these palaces, on these things, and he would run out of money. And there was this one time that he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to trump up these charges on the 45 wealthiest people in Israel. And he had them executed, and then he seized all their property to get out of his financial ruin. That sounds horrible, right? And on top of that, he taxed people like you would never believe. In the Roman Empire, Caesar required 12.5% of people's taxes. And then it was up to the regional kings, the regional governors, we'll call them, and he taxed people 50% of their income. And then you would come, so let's pretend you were a fisherman. You would come out from your day's catch and you would find somebody there waiting on you, somebody like Zacchaeus from the New Testament or like Matthew from the New Testament who's actually writing this, and they would tax you. They would say, I need 12.5% of this for Caesar. I need 50% for Herod, and I need however many percent for me. And they say that the Romans ended up taxing the Jewish people 75% of their income. When you read through the New Testament, that's how much people are being taxed. And you know what Jesus told them to do? Pay their taxes. It's kind of crazy, right? And so Herod was this terrible, terrible ruling king. These are the people that this story is kind of about. Now, I want to read you just a little bit more of this, and then I'm going to give you what these big ideas are. Now assembling, so Herod, he assembled all the chief priests and scribes of the people, and he inquired of them whether Christ, or the Messiah, was to be born. They told him, in Bethlehem of Judea. For so it is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel. Now at this point, when Herod finds this out, and all these people are there, you would think that everybody would just like jump up and get ready to go, right? But they didn't. It was met with just complete apathy, complete indifference. Nobody cared except for the wise men who went 900 miles from Persia to see him. Then Herod summoned these wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him." After listening to the king, they went on their way. Now, did he really want to worship him? No, he pretended worship, but he intended murder. And after listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts of gold and frankincense, there's your gift, and myrrh. And then, being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. You ever take a long trip just to go somewhere real quick, and then you have to turn around and go right back? Like there's a really great restaurant you want 3 hours away. You go, you eat, and then you come right back. Times that by about 1 billion is what they just did, right? They went, they delivered some goods, then they turn around and go 900 miles back on a donkey. It's crazy. But what can we learn from this story that maybe you already know, but you didn't realize it started with Christmas? Number one is that we get to learn about God's inclusivity. Everybody say inclusivity. Inclusivity. See, here's the thing. Matthew, each gospel writer writes to a different, they're writing about the same story, but you ever notice how they're different? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're always just a little bit different, and each one is writing to like a different type of person, and Matthew is writing to the Jewish people. Now, the Jewish people have held this belief forever that God is their God and that nobody else really has access to this one true God. It's just kind of for them. And all of a sudden, Matthew says, you know what? Actually, the first people that are going to get excited about seeing this Messiah, you know who they're going to be? They're going to be Persian-wise astrologers from far away. That's crazy to think about. And the other group of people that got excited about seeing Jesus, you know who they were? Shepherds. You know what shepherds were not allowed to do? Go to the temple and worship God, because they were around unclean animals all day. And so the first groups of people that get excited about worship with Jesus were the people that were outside of the religion altogether and people that had been pushed out. You know what the definition of inclusive means? It means people that were once marginalized or pushed out now get to be a part of it. And Matthew starts his gospel, starts the good news of Jesus, starts the Christmas story with this idea that was what was once just for the select, small, certain group of people is now for everybody. It's for everybody. That's an incredible, incredible deciding moment in history. The reason that you get to sit here today is because Matthew decided to write this Christmas story and show that this is for everybody, not just for a few people anymore. And you know how Matthew ends his gospel? You know how he ends the story? So the whole story is about trying to convince you that Jesus is the Messiah, right? And then he ends it by saying, now that you believe this to be true, go and tell all the other nations. And so he bookends it. He starts by saying, all the nations get to come and see Jesus. And it's for them, not just us. And now that you believe this is true, go and tell all the nations. This brings what was exclusive, and it makes it inclusive for the first time in the history of the world. I was hoping that would be the moment where you guys would jump up and applaud and scream and laugh and cheer. But it didn't happen. Maybe point number 2. Because the next thing that this teaches us, not just God's inclusivity, but God's power. God's power. Think about this. Do you guys realize that the way this whole story went down is that God shifted an entire Roman government, the entire Roman Empire. He shifted them, and he made them want to tax the people more. And in order to do that, you had to have a census. And that's the only reason that Mary and Joseph ended up back in Bethlehem. I mean, that was like the most inefficient way to do that ever. Couldn't God have whispered to Joseph, hey, go to Bethlehem? And that would have taken care of it. But instead, he moved an entire empire, maybe the strongest empire the world has ever seen, to make them want to do a census and tax people just so that he could get Joseph and Mary in Bethlehem. That's crazy to think about. So in the Christmas story that we've talked about today, God moved an empire by his strength. He made a donkey talk to make a scenario where the star could be prophesied about, and he made the constellations or the star, whatever it was, become brighter. Now, and what's so amazing is that God can do that we think he can't do things in our lives. We think that he can't be powerful and mighty in the things that we deal with. And so incredible is that Christmas teaches us just how strong God is. And the third thing is that it teaches us just how wise God is. It teaches us about God's wisdom. You know, the thing is, in the Old Testament, there was this guy named Joshua who was the leader of Israel. And he was a warrior leader. He led them from out of the wilderness between Egypt and Israel, and he led them all the way to the Promised Land. And he fought everybody along the way in the Promised Land that stood in their way. Do you guys realize that we actually call Jesus' name wrong every single time we call him Jesus? Should we all just take a nap right now? Can you hear me? Okay, good. His name was actually Yeshua, which is translated Joshua, which is a great name, by the way. And when people learned that he was going to be Yeshua, you know what they thought he was going to be? They thought he was going to be a warrior king. And that's exactly what people thought that they needed. That was the wisdom that people had. If we had a warrior king who would come and take away all our oppression and destroy our enemies, that will take care of everything. But God in his wisdom knew that's not the best way. Because when you build an empire, you build a kingdom, it may eventually fall. I'm going to build a kingdom that will last forever. I'm going to build one that's not built upon war. It's not going to be built upon all this. It's going to be built upon grace and love. And I'm going to send a Messiah who will come to not conquer the nations, but to conquer your sin, to conquer death and the grave. And in his infinite wisdom, God knew that would be the best plan. And Christmas teaches that. And then in order to get to the last thing real quick, I want to read a little bit more of this story in Matthew chapter 2. It says, "Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, 'Rise, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child and destroy him.' And he rose and he took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod." This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious. And he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all that region who were 2 years old and under, according to the time that had been ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah weeping and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more. You guys realize you can't even really read about this story, the part where he had all the babies killed, outside of the Bible, because it really doesn't exist, because it was really only probably about 20 babies that were killed, because Bethlehem is such a small area. Now, this is still a horrific tragedy, but on the list of Herod's murder told, this was hardly anything. And what this teaches us, actually, and you're not going to believe this, but this teaches us about God's compassion. I know you're not going to believe this, but I want you to understand something. What Matthew is doing here is he's teaching us something from the Old Testament that Jeremiah said, because there was this moment in history where, remember I told you about all the exiles that Israel had? There was this moment where this exile came, where they were taken to Babylon, and what happened was this city north of Jerusalem called Ramah, and all these people were taken there, and they were separated from their families and sold into slavery, and it was really, really, really horrible time. And Jeremiah begins to prophesy about that, and he begins to tell them, hey, listen, hope is coming. And these are the words that he says in Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 16 and 17. He says, one day your voice will cease its weeping, and your eyes will cease from their tears. For your children shall come back from the land of the enemy. There is a hope for your future, declares the Lord. You know what hope he's talking about? He's talking not about them coming back. He's talking about Jesus. He's talking about the Messiah bringing a hope in a way that they never could. And so Christmas teaches us all about God's compassion. Now listen, this Christmas season, I don't want you to just get caught up in all the different things that go on in your life. I want you to think about what Christmas brought. That it brought a relationship with God and his power and his wisdom and his compassion. And it included you when it never did before. And we can learn all of that from Christmas. And so this week, I want you to think about that as you're preparing for everything next weekend and next Monday, I think, 8 days from now, Christmas. As you're preparing this week, let that cross your mind, what Christmas brought to us. Father, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today, to learn from your word. And God, I just pray that you would help us to be reminded of your love and your grace, that you would help us to be reminded of all that Christmas taught us. And God, as we celebrate this time of year, remind us that we get to be included in your family. We can be called the sons and daughters of God because of Jesus, because of Christmas. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. All right. Take that connection card that is sitting on your seat. We are going to continue to worship real quick by receiving of our morning tithe and offering. Take that connection card that's sitting on your seat. Take a few seconds to fill that thing out. And if you would like more information about any of those things, make sure that you check the appropriate box, putting in the offering basket when it goes by here in just a moment. And while we are receiving the offering, we are going to be watching a video. Because I realize that some people may just decide to leave town before next week. I know. I've heard of other churches that have people leave before Christmas. I don't know. It may not happen here. But just in case, I want you to know what we're going to be starting up in January, 3 weeks from today, January 7th. We're going to be launching into a brand new series, and I want to make sure that you guys are all here for it. And so I want you guys to check out this video while we're receiving the offering this morning.
Rules of the Double Dog Dare. Listen closely. It begins with two opposing sides. Side 1 presents a seemingly insurmountable challenge known as a dare to Side 2. This dare is riddled with abounding risk, oftentimes with severe physical and social implications. When challenged, Side 2 must accept or refuse the dare presented. Refusing is equally, if not more, detrimental to one's social standing than actually accepting the dare and failing miserably. If Side 2 reluctantly declines the dare, then of course the challenger is forced to raise the stakes and extend the ultimate requisition, the Double Dog Dare. Everything is on the line. Risk it all and walk proudly in achievement, or lose and walk home with your tail between your legs. Only you can decide.
Well, last year we did a series called Double Dog Dare. This year we're doing a series called Double Dog Dare Part 2. And listen, how many of you would love to be able to say that 2018 was the best year of your life? I think everybody would. And I'm going to give you some challenges this year, or starting in January. We're going to give you 4 challenges, and I want you just to focus in on one of them. That's going to be your challenge, your dare for 2018, so it can be the best year of your life. All right, have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you back next Sunday, 9 or 10:30, and then 4 o'clock for our Christmas Eve service.